All right, so today is chart practice. I've got 4 blind charts, and so we can do it like you can pick things out if you want, or in this particular case, I have 2 men and 2 women. In the case of both women, they are both singers. I will tell you that, so you don't have to deal with what the profession will be. But in both cases, there's something very specific about their life that I'm looking for. And so I'm wondering if you can see that. So this is singer number 1. So I was listening today to somebody DM'd me on Reddit, and they asked me to help them to find the Almutin of what is it? The Almutin of fertility. And so I went back to that class about compound almutins and fertility. It just so happened that I had, that was one of the classes. And I was listening to that again. And I had started with the compound almutin of the soul, which was the easiest thing to find because all you used was the place of Mercury and the place of the moon. And so that might be a place to start. I mean, so first of all, let me ask you a question. When you get a chart like this, what's the very first thing you do? What's the very first thing that you look at? That's my question to you. So how do you enter? What's the first thing that you do?
Look at the ascendant and then the ascendant ruler.
Okay. All right. So following that method, what information do we get?
We have an exalted moon in the 11th house.
Okay. And of course, the Taurus is the sign of the throat and
the
of
singer. So this could be someone that's like a singer.
Right, exactly.
The 11th house can deal with popularity. So maybe
Yes.
someone that's a popular singer. If you look at the second house, we see the sun is in the house of its joy. And then that would be ninth. It would be whole sign, right? The sun would be in the ninth. The whole sign
It would be whole sign ninth, but it's on the midheaven, so it's in the 10th in this chart.
Okay, so the sun is in the 10th. That's another indicator that someone will come before the public eye, like a major way, or be recognized. Now, I know that's a general term, but
no, that all of that sounds good. So yeah, so this is a singer, a popular singer, and in the public eye, yes. So that was in the public eye.
Was this person managed by their partner?
Not their partner, but someone close to them. What brought that? Was it the moon applying to the Saturn?
No, the midheaven is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter's right on the descendant. Yeah.
Although I think that the sun in the midheaven is telling us something. Is answering your question.
Would it be a sibling, third house ruler?
Yeah, that's right.
And this would it be a male, like a brother?
A male sibling, that's right. So that might give it away kind of, but I'm looking for a specific detail about this person's personal life. So it's not about anything that had to do with them publicly. It's about something that would be going on in their personal life. Where would we look for the stuff that we can't see?
The 12th and the 8th.
12th house.
Okay. But like, where would we look for what we can't see in the person?
And would it be the descendant?
Not really. I mean, what do I always say about the moon? It's just alive within us, right? We can't see what's in the moon. The only way that we see what's in the moon is when we act, right? Is when we do something or talk or walk, or do you see what I mean? It's an invisible aspect. It's an invisible thing that affects everything. So the moon, so basically the mind, right? The mind is something that we can't see, but that we experience. So yes, 8th, 12th, all of that stuff as far as that which is hidden. Okay, so if we follow that, so let's follow that path. If we follow that which is hidden, what's hidden? What do we think is hidden? What are they hiding?
Secrets.
Well, I mean,
Mercury's
obviously,
in a mute.
what would be the nature of them?
Well, Mercury is in a mute sign, and then Moon is in Taurus. And I know Taurus is known to be a licentious sign. So that could
Mhm.
be Venus and Mars is together, and you said that's like a sexual scandal. So that could be maybe something like a sexual scandal gets out or something.
Not that's I love the logic, but that's not necessarily what happened. But that's fantastic logic. But no, that's not what I'm looking for. But I love the entire train of thought.
Okay.
I was going in the same direction, so I have to regroup.
Isn't it? I mean, it's interesting. I might need to relook at this chart to see if there's any of that. From what I understand, there isn't. But from what I understand, there isn't. But there is something else. Now, note that. Okay, so Venus and Mars are together, as you mentioned. Venus is the ruler of what? So Venus rules what house? Mars rules what house?
Venus is ruling the 5th and the 12th, and Mars is
Okay.
ruling the 11th and the 6th.
Okay, so that's connecting the good fortune to the bad fortune. Right? That's connecting 5, which is good fortune, to 6, which is bad fortune, 11, which is good spirit, to 12, which is bad spirit. Right? So it's not just Mars Venus, it's the ruler of the 11th and the 12th together, or the ruler of the 6th and the 12th together. So, and that means also the square of the moon to the Venus, right? So we've got the moon is separating from the Mars, applying to the Venus, really applying to the sun. So with that, and that's another way that we can see that the brother's involved with the public life. The moon's next application is to the sun, and it's by sextile. And it's in Venus, and the sun is in Venus's exaltation. But I'm looking for something else, and maybe it's not so.
Does it involve money?
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not super apparent, obviously, from this. Well, it is, but it isn't. It is, but
Okay.
it is in a certain
I know
way.
what you mean.
It is, but you'd have to. It is. I'm going to give you a hint. It is, but you have to go deeper into the moon in order to understand what I'm talking about.
And just to reiterate,
It's an opposition to Neptune. Could that? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, good.
No. You go. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, whoever.
Okay, so the opposition to Neptune and Scorpio in the 5th house, that could deal with like, I know Scorpio is the sign of poison, so that could be alcohol. The 5th house are the things that you enjoy. The moon is like a liquid planet, or it's a liquid planet. Taurus deals with the throat, so could there be an issue with alcohol?
It's not alcohol, but it is with consumption.
Of food?
Yes. So this is the chart of Karen Carpenter, who died because of her eating disorder. So what I was
Now
basically,
that you said it all makes sense, but wow.
right? So now that so the reason that I brought it in is so that's why I mentioned look closely at the moon, because what does the moon represent? Feeding, right? The moon represents the tit and the stomach. It's what feeds you and what takes the food in, right? So the moon is, and also now the moon is the ruler of the ascendant. So whatever issues the moon is going to have, it's going to be issues with the physical body. So, right, so that's the whole issue, is that there's some kind of 12th house issue with the body, right? The self-undoing is all about my body image. And look at that, the moon is the next application after the sun is to Venus, who's the ruler of the 12th house. If we use the whole sign, then we would see, okay, so when I was asking you guys what is the very first thing that you would be doing? And that was an excellent question, or answer rather, about looking at the ascendant and the ruler of the ascendant. And believe it or, and I always used to do that first. Nowadays, I don't anymore. Nowadays, what I actually do is I look to see who's angular first and what houses that represents. Note, Jupiter is angular. Jupiter is the ruler of the natural sixth. So illness of some sort comes up, right? And Jupiter is fallen. Then we also have Mercury, who would be in the natural 10th, which means that the ruler of the 12th is also angular. So we've got the ruler of the 6th angular, we've got the ruler of the 12th angular. Now, no one's really involved with Jupiter or Mercury, but just knowing that already, that pushes something kind of out. The other thing is that what's interesting to me is, okay, yeah. So the other thing that's interesting to me about this is, once again, that the moon is applying to this, it's applying to the sun, which is already scrutiny and judgment, right? So that's the scrutiny of the light of day. And then to Venus, who's all about vanity and beauty, right? Even though this Venus is not particularly in a particularly sensual place, right? You were talking about the moon being in Taurus, which is licentious, but Venus is in Aquarius, which kind of that kind of cancels that out, right? Because Aquarius has a tendency to have difficulty with embodiment. So that Venus and Mars in Aquarius, I have Venus and Mars in Aquarius, I forget 6 and 13, just like this. And that's a problem for me, even though when I am having sex, I'm very sexual. I'm not always that geared towards it. And this person might be a little bit more so, but not necessarily, because what we can see is the Venus was coming out through the music. And there aren't a whole lot of stories about her romantic life. There's a lot of stuff spoken about her brother, but there's very little that I remember spoken about her romantic life. So already with Cancer rising, we know that the person is susceptible to different mood swings and emotional states, hypersensitivities, things of that nature, is physiologically affected by stress. And then in the 11th, that should be a good thing. But coming from the square of Mars and applying to the Venus, who's the ruler of the 12th, that gives a bit of a problem or an issue. And here the moon, of course, rules the 1st and the 2nd. Right, but if we looked at it from the whole sign, the moon rules the 1st and the sun rules the 2nd, and there we've got the moon and the sun coming to that in that sextile, that applying sextile. So we know that there's something about, like we would say, maybe money, but it could also be with whatever we consume, knowing that Pisces always has a tendency to be about a susceptibility to different types of what's the word I'm looking for? To sensation, basically an impulse control. So Pisces is really about the lack of impulse control. And so here we have the moon, and so it's the ruler of the 2nd is expressing that lack of impulse control there, and so is. Good.
So no, I was just wondering, she had anorexia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she was anorexic. If you look at it, well, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, you remember? I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago in class, I was asking about like aspects to the ascendant. Does that like color, like oppositions to the ascendant, does that color the native? And I find it interesting that Mars is in the 7th house in domicile, and then after the person suffers from anorexia, like Saturn.
Oh, wait, where? Wait, which Mars?
Not Mars. Sorry, Saturn. Saturn is in.
Got it. So the emaciation, Saturn that would waste.
Yeah, aspecting the ascendant. And it's funny now, like I'm seeing the square to Uranus. I'd see that, like, disordered eating habits, and the square to Mars, disordered eating habits, and that trine with the moon and Saturn. I would see that, like, the person, it takes a lot of discipline, focused in the wrong direction, obviously, to restrict your eating that much. So this this moon exalted in Taurus, interacting with that Saturn, strengthening the ability to limit food intake. I'd that's what I'd pick.
I agree. Lack, getting off on the lack. All right. Yeah. Okay. Good. Well done. Let's move on.
I have one more thing. So
Yeah.
I wonder, because that was kind of hard to get to, I wonder if it wasn't so apparent from the outside looking in that she had an eating disorder. I wonder if she hid it.
Oh,
Like,
she
was
did
it
hide
known
it.
publicly?
No. Well, I mean, no, it wasn't known publicly until after she died. Remember, mind you, she
So
died
that
in.
would be the fifth house. So we would be after death, right?
Oh, what after death? Yes. So that would be, and that's with the Mars. That's the Venus with the Mars there. So that's, and the moon is is applying to her as well. So if we did use that, or it would be Mars, or it would be Mars, right? Because it's a Cancer rising, so it's one or the other. But they're together. Yeah, it was a secret. It was a secret, and there's the house. And Mercury's the house of secrets. In the fourth, it was a secret. I mean, her family kind of understood, but people usually keep that a secret, right? People. That's one of those things that people use. I mean, it's funny. I remember actually, I had a really good friend in high school, and I was friend with two girls, and both of them went off to, actually one was with us at this, went to the same university I did, and the other went off to the University of Michigan. And I remember when she would see her, when our friend who was going to college with me, when she would see her, she would say, something's not right. She's too skinny. She's just, there's something wrong. She's just lost too much weight. And she would say it. We'd see her periodically, and she would say it every time. And then about a year later, she finally came out that she had anorexia, and how the whole thing had kind of happened, and how it was subtly reinforced by her roommate, and how they would kind of compete to eat the least and everything. It was just really interesting. So yes, it is something that tends to happen in the shadows.
And then that makes much more sense in her chart with Venus and Mars in the eighth, because
Yes.
I think it was Shanice, you made the point about like the ascendant, like how the descendant can color the ascendant. And so that would also apply with the eighth house, because if the second house is what we eat, then the eighth house is like what goes out. And then Venus being a planet that can represent food. And then with the moon being a Taurus, I'm wondering, like, did she fluctuate? Like, she wasn't skinny all the time. Like, her weight probably fluctuated. Or is
No,
it because it's in
she was always
Taurus?
skinny. I think more than likely this person probably had a voracious appetite that they controlled with no mercy. I think this person loved food and denied it to her, denied herself.
And so this would essentially, in this chart, be a Saturn issue
Yeah, this
for the
person
the
was
denial.
punishing themselves for having an appetite. And I think it was, and here's the other thing is, remember that in this chart, the moon rules the body, and the moon's so the moon's trying to be Venus in this chart. But the Venus Mars is in Aquarius. The moon's trying to be Venus. But the thing is that Karen Carpenter was known for her beautiful voice. She wasn't known for being a beautiful woman, even though she wasn't an unattractive woman. And to be to be as famous as she was, to be as celebrated as she was at the particular time, even though she wasn't unattractive and she was always skinny, she probably didn't feel like she was out at the same time as Raquel Welch and other people, kind of these bombshells. Like, she was no bombshell, including some singers were bombshells, like Nancy Wilson of Heart and her sister. They were both fucking hot as shit. Linda Ronstadt was totally hot, so those are the kinds of things. Those are the people who were kind of around at the same time. And so she wasn't really, so I think she might have felt well, obviously this person feels like they're fighting with their femininity, right? Because the moon in Taurus should be in the fullness of femininity, right? But with squaring its ruler, who's also with the hot and dry masculine planet, that changes things. And it's also in a masculine sign. So she might have been kind of tomboyish, and she might have felt like she was lacking something with femininity. I think it had more to do with wanting to conform to a standard of beauty than it had to do with Um, I think it had to do with physical, with body dysphoria more than it had to do with food. I mean, obviously it had to do with food too, because the moon is all about consumption as well. And in this chart, she's ruling the second house, right? So the consumption, who I am and what I consume, they're all mixed in together already. And then the moon's applying to the ruler of the 12th, and already, and so the 12th house would be, which is Venus. Venus would say, I'm not pretty enough. What do I see when I look in the mirror? You know, that would be, it would be that kind of thing. Are my tits big enough? Are men really attracted to me? The boys love my brother. They never say anything about me. So, and even if we use Mercury, Mercury is in Venus's exaltation, even, right? So then even it's, that even on some level shows it a little bit more. It's in Venus's exaltation. It's a delusion. There's a mental delusion. It's in the exaltation of Venus, so there's some kind of delusion about beauty, delusion about what I should be looking like. That's my take. Okay, let's go to the next female singer. Okay, so both of these female singers are highly celebrated, you know, before the public eye, etc. Now, this person, this is something that the person is known for publicly. The thing that I'm looking for. And it's not a negative.
It's the same chart.
I was just about to ask, did you switch it? Because it's the same.
I don't. Oh, I did, but I didn't. I'm switching on the share. There we go. 8 Virgo rising.
Perfect.
Okay. So we know the person's a singer, or we know the person's a celebrated artist, but there's something very specific about how that came to be.
Something specific. Okay. So you're looking at what's angular. We have a lot of angular planets. We got the sun. Then Jupiter isn't doing too good. He's in his detriment and
he's combust.
Under combust. So we have a Jupiter problem. Would that be appropriate to say?
Well, we in this particular case, we do have kind of a Jupiter problem, but it didn't show up as an inability to get married.
Does this person have a problematic partner? Because again, Saturn aspecting the ascendant.
Did this person have a problematic what?
Say that again. Partner, their spouse. Was their spouse a problem?
She was married for a very long time to the same person. And as far as I know, I mean, I don't think so. Hold on, I'm going to look her up. Keep making your observations. But yes, that would point, what you're looking at points to something kind of like that, doesn't it? Or it would point to, if it's not a difficult life with a partner, what else would it point to?
Difficult life in business.
Well, or it points to something else about the partner.
Oh.
The partner is coming from a state of detriment, which means that they may. Did she marry down?
Kind of. Hold on, I'm gonna.
I was gonna say an unfaithful partner with Jupiter in Gemini, maybe like scattered attention.
I'm thinking about the Saturn in the 7th. What would that tell us?
Control.
Yeah.
Or there's something really obvious. Age. That'd be the first.
Yeah.
That'd be the first thing I would be looking at is the age. If there was an age difference. So let's see. Relationships. Okay. You ready? Baker's first marriage was to an American Pullman porter, Willie Wells, when she was only 13 years old.
Oh, wow. Young marriage.
So that is a
Yeah.
problematic partner. Their partner's trash. You're a predator.
Okay, but another short-lived marriage followed in 1921.
Double-bodied sign of the descendant, more than one
Yes,
marriage.
it looks like 4 marriages. Okay, so I was wrong about that. So yes, there is a marriage problem. 4 marriages to men. Let's see.
Jupiter in a double-bodied sign, detriment. Yeah. Then what is Mercury doing? Mercury is in Taurus. Or
So
no,
yeah,
Gemini.
so yeah, it sounds like, okay, thanks. I'm glad that you brought that up because or rather just brought up all of that stuff about the marriage, because yes, you're right. It does kind of point to, like you said, there's a Jupiter problem. There's a Jupiter issue in this chart. Jupiter's in Gemini. It's in a double-bodied sign. There's double-bodied signs and, like you said, fertile signs on the 7th house. Saturn's there, so there should be some kind of issue with a power dynamic or an age dynamic of some sort. We saw both. And there should be more than one, possibly very many. And that's definitely the case here. Look with the Venus. The Venus is also in a fertile sign. Her triplicity rulers are her, the moon, and Mars. Where's Mars? Mars is also in Gemini, right? So in the double body. So we know that there'd be at least 2, right? And we know that there'd be at least 2. And we know more than likely with the Saturn here that at least one of them should probably be older. Or there should be an age disparity where one of them is older, at least. All right, but that's not what I'm looking for. Thank you. Fantastic work. Wow. I mean, Tamarius, I've never really seen you do work, too much work, but like Shanice, I've been watching you for a while, and you're really getting sharper.
Yay. I was also going to mention the fact that would you say this, that you know how the sun takes on the qualities of the planet that it's combusting, with the sun applying to Jupiter, the marriages might have felt like a prison.
Because
it being the ruler of the 12th, yeah.
Because the ruler of the 12th, or rather that the self-undoing is I can't be alone. I can't really be intimate. I think that's really the thing. The self-undoing is that I can't actually be intimate. I love being around others. I love being with people, but the closer we get, the more I want to get away.
I'd also say that idea would be reinforced by the moon in an air sign and Mercury in an air sign, like
but moon's in
emotion.
Libra. But
in
see,
Libra, yeah, in an air sign. With the moon in an air sign, though, I think that there is a intellectual front versus an emotional front to the way that like you approach emotional things.
Except
like,
with Libra, the mental front is all about who am I going to be with next. You see what I'm saying? The Libra is mentally obsessed with connecting, with being with joining. So I think in that respect, then look at how the Venus is in Cancer.
Would you say that there's a difference between an emotional joining and a transactional joining?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Oh, so do you think it's more but I wouldn't necessarily think that because somebody has the moon in Libra that it would be more transactional. I wouldn't jump to that necessarily to that conclusion. I mean, and once again, it's coming to it from a sign-based perspective as opposed to a planet-based perspective, right? So you're giving a lot of power to the sign of Libra, and it's like, I don't know. It's one of the signs of Venus, so that means it's interpersonal. That's her thing, right? So even though it's an air sign, and all of the air signs are social, right? They're all the social. They're all the rational signs. They're all the rational human signs. So they're all the ones that want the human contact in the first place. So from the traditional standpoint, a lot of the psychobabble orientations around some of these signs don't really hold up. Libra is still the sign of Venus, and Venus is about getting together with others. You know what? Creating an opportunity for coitus, or for beauty, or for pleasure, or for intoxication, or for whatever it is. But that's what she's about.
But
So,
not for depth. That's what I'm looking at, the depth,
depth. Okay, but I
depth.
don't, but not necessarily, because I think if all of this stuff wasn't in Gemini, this person could be deep, because the
Yes,
Venus.
but the stuff plus the stuff in Gemini, that's what I'm talking about. Plus that
Oh,
Mercury
okay.
in Gemini.
Okay, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
okay. So that's my point.
yeah.
Not on its own. So on its
Not
own,
on its own, no. But with that Mercury in Gemini, I'd say that like this is a very forward thinking, not emotional forward chart. Like, yeah.
This is a social butterflies chart. Loves
Yes,
to be,
yes.
life of the party, social butterfly, loves to be on the scene, hates to be left out, nerve center, all of that. Like anything where shit's happening, this person would more than likely want to be. But we haven't
Is
yet
there an
come to
issue
what?
with the father?
I don't know. Let's see that.
Because I'm
But
still fixated on Jupiter. Because I feel like whatever this issue is whatever it is going to Jupiter some way.
remember,
Don't
I
know
said
why.
it's not something bad. So you're focusing on that Jupiter, and it's not something bad.
We're looking for something in the career, right, Antoine?
Yeah, we're looking for something that is known publicly about this person based on their
Oh.
career. Yeah, so that's the question is this. So unlike, yeah, I
Also,
love it.
I'm
I
looking
mean,
at
yeah, dig
Mercury.
it, digging
Okay,
for those
look at
depths. I get
Mercury.
it. Right, so dig those depths. That's fine, but in this particular case, we're not looking. We just did that with the last one. In this
So
one, I'm asking for what's actually known about the person. So what would we look to for that?
Mercury, because Mercury is representing the person and the 10th house of the public and
Right, the public
what is
image
known and the reputation. And so Mercury is approaching the combustion of the sun, or is in combustion of the sun, which can mean she's being like burned out, maybe. You said that Mercury in the sun wasn't necessarily not a bad thing, but so
It's
you
something he's
said it's
used.
something about the career. So
Well, see,
and she's
here's
in
the one
Gemini.
thing that I have a tendency to notice that that you're gonna develop into doing more readily is that you don't tend to take into account the house rulerships all as much. Like it'll be like you'll focus on the planets, but not on who's there. So the rulership of the house tells us what's actually going on with the person. And so what house rulers are in the 10th house?
Third house. So you got Mars ruling the third house and the eighth house, and that can be problematic. But we have so the third house is just dealing with siblings and relatives, information, travel. Then the eighth house is dealing with other people's money, inheritance, also like death, inactivity.
This is
Then
something good
Jupiter.
now. And so the sun is the
I
12th
know
house,
I'm just
right?
like filling in the blanks. I'm just, trying to fill in
So
the blanks.
Jupiter 7 and 4, Sun 12, Mercury what? Mercury 1 and 10, Mercury 1 and 10, Jupiter 7 and 4, Sun 12, Mars 3 and 8, right? 3 and 8. Yeah, 3 and 8. So those are the things that supposedly should be the most well known. That should be the most. Now, what are the things that Mercury and Jupiter both are kind of known for?
Children?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, that is something. That's not what I was looking for, but yes, that is a major aspect of this chart is children. But it's not what I'm looking for. But I am looking. So actually, the thing I'm actually looking for is really being indicated, in my opinion, by the sun in the 10th, and by the mutual reception of the Venus and the moon. The Mercury going to the sun in the 10th, and the mutual reception of the Venus and the moon. Now note the mutual reception is by sign, right? That's not, the aspect isn't involved. But what would those things, now take into account the house rulerships of these planets I just mentioned. This person, in order to get their dream, had to do something. They had to do something in order to realize their dream of success. This person obviously got very, very successful. But in order to realize that dream of success, they had to do something specific. What did they do?
Religion? No.
Not okay, but
Mm.
Get married, have children.
No, but Tamarius is with it. He just is in the wrong part of it.
Devote.
What? Devotes?
Oh, I said devote because I'm looking at the moon, then I'm looking at the planets that you said they had then I'm looking at the Venus and the Mercury, and I see Mercury's in the 10th, Venus rules the 9th. That's why I said
Yes.
religion.
Okay, but what else?
But
But
long distance
what else
travel.
does the night? There we go. There it is. This person had to long distance travel to realize their dream. This is Josephine Baker, who was nobody. She was a chorus girl in the United States, and the thing that she was in, the performance or the play that she was in, traveled to Paris, and she started showing up in nightclubs and dancing and singing, and became a sensation in Paris, and she became world famous. So this person had to leave the country. They had to leave the place of their home in order to become famous. So we've got the Venus in the 11th, right? So the 11th house is the dream. And so there is this mutual reception between the 9th house ruler and the 11th house ruler. It's specific between the 9th house, the 11th house, and the 2nd, right? Because those are the two houses that are connected specifically by sign. But also Venus is the 9th house ruler. Note that she's not in the 9th house. She's not in the 10th. The 12th house ruler is. And the 12th house, remember, among other things, represents exile. And
Is 12th house also faraway places?
Yes, it is.
Right? And with the 12th house ruler taking on the significations of Mercury and Jupiter.
And so is the 7th house ruler.
Okay. Yeah.
So and Jupiter is the 7th house ruler. So we've got the 1st house ruler with the 12th house ruler and the 7th house ruler. We've got the ruler of the 9th and the 11th in mutual reception to the ruler of the 11th. So
legacy is able to be established once you move.
Yes.
Once you move.
And note
legacy
here,
10th house. Okay.
And note if we look at it from the part of fortune, then we've got first of all, Venus is in the 7th from the part of fortune, so she's angular. The moon is now in the 10th from the part of fortune, and now Mercury is the ruler of the 9th. So now Mercury is the ruler of the 9th, the moon is the ruler of the 7th. Who's the ruler of the 11th now? The 11th is Mars. So now it's Mars, and look at how the moon and Mars just left each other. That was the last thing she did. She's void of course, and basically the last thing she did was trine Mars, who's the ruler of the 9th from the part of fortune. And note the 12th from the part of fortune is Jupiter. It's all up there in the 10th.
Did she have any kids?
She had many. She was not able. I don't think she was able to have any, but she adopted like 12 or 14.
Okay, that makes sense.
Let's see.
That makes sense because Saturn is the ruler of the 5th, which is not good, but it's in a fertile sign. So let's work around that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
with adoption, through adoption.
If she had any of her own children, because she called her children the Rainbow Coalition or something. She and her husband adopted children from all over the world, and they had all of these different races as children, and So children. Okay, during her participation in the civil rights movement, and that would be 1950s. So during the 50s. So by this time, she's born in 1906. So she's approaching 50. Baker began to adopt children, forming a family which she referred to as the Rainbow Tribe. So Baker wanted to prove that children of different ethnicities and religions could still be brothers. She often took the children with her cross country, and when they were at their chateau, she arranged tours so visitors could walk the grounds and see how natural and happy the children were in the Rainbow Tribe. She doesn't say exactly how many there were. Excuse me. But she had a lot. She created dramatic backstories. There's all this Mercury, picking them with clear intent in mind. At one point, she wanted and planned to adopt a Jewish baby, but she settled for a French one. So even this whole thing about, kind of creating there seems to be quite a bit of crazy, a little bit of crazy with Josephine Baker, not Janet Baker. That's another singer. A little bit of, or fanciful, and also, like you say, this transactional aspect of relationships. The interested in the relationship for the story, right?
Yep.
Interested in for their story, not interested so much in them as people, but interested in them for their story.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been something with the husbands too. Interested, what their story was, because it said that she had affairs with a bunch of really important Frenchmen. Like, one of the most important architects of the time, etc. Like she was one of those women. Like she was basically like, she was one of those kind of performer / courtesan type women. And so she was really involved with important men. Note that the Jupiter and the Sun are together in this chart, right? So if we just wanted to look at the chart for men, we would see that, Jupiter and that Sun for men, right? And Jupiter for men, and Mars for men, Saturn for men. The Saturn brings us back to the Jupiter, Sun, Mars. So, and so she probably liked men who were good talkers, intelligent. There was an author, I think, that she was involved with. She was involved with an artist. She was involved with an architect. So people who had important skill, Mercury is skill. So I think this is a very interesting chart. I just thought that was an interesting thing. And yes, we can see. Now, of course, here's the thing, like, if we were to see this chart, that might not pop out at me, but it would pop out that the ruler of the 9th was in the 11th. And like you said, you might have thought it was religion. See, me seeing this in Libra would make me think maybe not so much. And this stuff in Gemini, including the Mars, I think, no, this person is probably much more radical in their thinking with the Mars there. More philosophical and more radical. So more than likely religion would feel confining, although they might still do certain rituals that they grew up with to feel comfortable, or something like that. Or they might have a belief. They might have a strong abiding belief, but not hold to any doctrine. All right, let's move on. Okay, this is one of the men that I don't want to say shaped my childhood, but was definitely a feature. Like, there's certain things that are, certain, like, kind of like for some people it's, Teletubbies or Cabbage Patch Kids or whatever. This person is one of the things that were kind of a part of my childhood. And so what I'm going to just ask you for some general things about this person. This person is not a singer or a theatrical. Well, this person does perform, but it is not in a theatrical type. What kind of performance do you think this person might do?
Well, looking at what's angular, yeah, Mercury and Scorpio. Oh, well, it'll be in the natural 10th with the Sun.
It's in Libra.
That would be, so that's a good point I want to ask. So if a planet is okay, it's in Libra, but would it still be influencing the 10th house, or does the 6th house, or does the 5-degree rule apply if it's of the sign of the next house. That's one thing I want to get that I want to clear up because I'm confused about that.
Well, in this particular case, the Mercury is not near a cusp. It needs to be near a cusp for that to be the case.
Okay.
So in this,
And I
so if you,
think probably because I'm used to looking at whole sign charts that's
but it would be
kind
in
of
the
throwing
ninth
me
house
off.
if it were whole sign, right? So it'd be it's
Yeah.
in Libra, so it would just be the plain old ninth. In order for it to be close to the midheaven, in this particular case, the midheaven is almost the very end of Scorpio. It would need to be in Scorpio at the end, and then within the 5 degree rule would apply. So that applies for cusps, planets that are before cusps.
Okay.
So in this person's life, where ninth house topics really at the forefront, money and
Well,
public recognition.
money. Well, wait, that's not a ninth house. Neither of those are ninth house topics.
No. I said ninth house topic because of the angular Venus.
Okay.
And then I said money and public recognition because Jupiter is in the first and it's the ruler of the second and the 11th.
Second and the 11th. Yes, money, the need for money and the public recognition thing is yes, correct.
Something involving speech,
What's that?
talking. Something involving communication, speech, talking.
Oh, is that the type of performance you mean? No. Before we go to that though, tell me what kind of person this is. Go ahead and start from there.
With the ascendant on Aquarius, I'd say, and a retrograde fallen Saturn, this person might attract a lot of attention. Because the MC is at 0 degrees, like, a little bit of difference in the birth time could mean Aquarius, not Aquarius, Scorpio or Sag MC. So I'm not sure about the public reputation, but with it being in Sag, like again, like that larger than life personality is coming through. Like maybe they might have been loud, like Saturn in Aries. I know somebody with Saturn in Aries, and they talk a lot.
Our friend,
Maybe with
our
no
friend
substance.
Samarius has Saturn in Aries retrograde.
Oh,
so
really?
tread lightly.
That's so funny. Oh my
Tread
goodness.
lightly.
Well, I do have a reputation for talking too much. So
They're okay, yes, because I feel like they want to take the stage. Like that's how my friend is. I love her dearly, but that's how she is.
I think that this person definitely talked a little too much and wanted to take the stage, and but like as a Saturn retrograde Aries, how would this person get along with other people? Do we think?
not well.
Why?
This could be somebody that it could be combative or maybe not interested in working with other people because Saturn in Aries is much more independent, it's much more focused on itself when it's ruling the ascendant. And if you're looking at it in terms of the houses that Saturn is ruling, he's also ruling the 12th house of bad spirit. So that could be a person who may have some secret enemies based on who they are. They may have some people that wish them harm.
I think that oh, sorry. I was just going to say that Tamir is like that is totally reinforced by the fact that Saturn is making a sign-based opposition to the sun, which is the descendant ruler. So they probably don't get along with other people very well.
Interesting. Now, note that what about so they probably don't get along so well with others.
But they need attention though.
They need attention, and
so that's
all of that is probably very, very correct. They need attention. What else?
We got the Sun and Mercury in the ninth. So that's dealing with long distance travel, religion. The sun is ruling the seventh house right there. So this person could marry someone from a different background, maybe.
Not necessarily. Um, so we haven't gotten any closer to, and here's a great, here's something, it's really important. The more the longer that I work with this stuff, the more that the part of fortune really, really, really shows, it really kind of gives us so much more information. Because in my opinion, if once you know that both the part of fortune and the part of spirit are owned by the same planet, things start to kind of come together. So in this chart, the part of fortune is in Scorpio. The part of spirit is exactly on that Saturn. Now, taking into account that Mars is the ruler of both of those planets, both of those points, what does the Mars imply? Right, you've been talking about the Sun, Mercury. You've looked at the Jupiter, and you did the stuff that was angular, the Venus and the Jupiter and that stuff, and also with the Moon there as well. Also, with the thing that you missed is that both female planets are angular, and so there'd be something having to do with women, right? Something issues having to do with women, and we know that they may or may not be quite so good because the Moon is applying to that nasty Saturn, and the Venus is just leaving that Pluto, although we're not really paying too much attention to that. But the Venus is kind of all by herself, doing very little. Also, the ruler of the sixth is in the seventh, right? So the ruler of the sixth is angular, and the ruler of the fourth is or rather that's the third, I guess, because it's intercepted. But the third/fourth, but the third, that has something that kind of makes some sense.
Were the partners very materialistic?
No, not that I know of.
Oh.
Although, but when we think of materialistic, we think of holding on to something, right? Acquisitive. I want to acquire this thing. Or the partners were very clingy, and the partners held on. I'll say that. Okay, so this chart is very subtle and interesting. I'm not going to tell you who it is just yet, but I want to just bring a few things to the fore. So note that once again, that the Mars becomes focal when we look at the two parts, and that Mars is in the sign of Mercury. So what do we know about when I say Mercury and Mars are together? All right, because that can also mean when Mercury is in Mars's sign and Mars is in Mercury's sign, right?
Criminality, was it?
Criminality and liars and criminals. It can be the bending. It can be the bending of the truth and the bending of the law. And so this person did involve themselves in criminal activity. But also note another thing. Mars is in the 8th house. And note that, okay, Mars is in the 8th house. Note that Mercury is the ruler of the 8th house in both the regular chart and in the part of fortune chart. And that the ruler of the part of fortune is in the radical 8th house. Now, when we think of the 8th house, what do we think of? Or rather, we've learned that the 8th house is the house of terror and fear. Fear and terror. And tortures and things of that nature. So we have the ruler of the fortune, Mars, in this place of terror and fear. Now, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that they were.
Is a murderer?
No, not a murderer. Well, not that we know of.
that we know of. Okay,
Well, I mean, yeah,
I got
well,
you. But
yeah,
that's
not a
not the
murderer.
point. Yeah.
Not a murderer. Because we can tell he's not specifically a murderer. But here's the thing. Note that the Mars, we've got cholera in the 8th. We've got cholera around the 8th, right? We've got cholera with the 8th. We've got fire in the 8th, and we've got fire with the Lord of the 8th. And what does Mercury represent? Mercury represents a few things.
Children,
Yes, but
education, travel, information.
travel, right? But and so that means it represents, as far as travel represents, it represents what?
Short distance travel.
Short distance,
Right.
and so that usually means travel by
Car.
or travel. Well,
Feet.
the car goes by
Road. So like a highway robber.
road. This person is about fire and the road. What would that mean? Note that Mercury's the ruler, Mars is the ruler of the 3rd in the 8th. So if it were fire, the road, and terror, what would that mean? And conveyance, right? That's where you were going, conveyances. So it's conveyances, it's fire, it's the road, it's fear. This person is a daredevil, a motorcycle daredevil. There's the fire there too. Here's the fire here as well. And that's near the cusp of the 3rd. The fire in the 8th. The ruler of the 8th is with the fire. This is the chart of Evel Knievel, who was, you may have never heard of him, but he was one of the most famous people of the 70s, of the late 60s and early 70s. Like I said, I was born in 66, so I'm thinking especially 8, 9, and at 8 years old, this guy, it's even interesting that he was obsessed with the fountains at Caesar's palace. Caesar, render unto Caesar, that's Leo, right? That's Libra, that's Leo, and Italy and Rome and Caesar, all that stuff, that's Leo. So he was obsessed with Caesar's palace and the fountains. There's the fountains. We just talked about places, water, moon, and the places. This guy was obsessed with the fountains at Caesar's palace. And so he tried to he basically would fly over things. He would drive up a ramp, and then he would fly over. He started with 15 trucks, and then he got more and more. He was going to try to do the Grand Canyon. Of all things, he was going to create like a motorized device that he could get across the Grand Canyon. And he did it with a smaller canyon, and it didn't work. And but like, I think when he did the thing with Caesar's palace, he ended up in a coma. He has, now here's something interesting, and let's see if we can see that. Now, I think we can, if we look especially at the Saturn retrograde. Evel Knievel is in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most broken bones of all time. Saturn rules the bones. And note that the ruler of the 6th is in the 1st. Bones. Saturn rules the 1st, and Saturn rules the bones. And he broke his legs. He shattered his femur. He broke his legs.
Ruler of the 6th.
Jupiter is the ruler. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Not ruler of the 6th. Jupiter is the exaltation ruler of the 6th. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay.
My fault. I was looking at it from that direction. But even if you wanted to look at it instead, that the ruler of the 6th is applying to the ruler of the 1st. So that's enough. Ruler of the 6th applies to the ruler of the 1st, right? Ruler of the 6th house is bad fortune, right? Then we've got what else? Then the part of fortune. Now, the interesting thing about this is nothing's really, the Jupiter is separating from it. But other than that, nothing is really kind of touching it. But it's it's kind of affecting everybody on some level. It's affecting this Mercury Sun square, Sun conjunction. It's affecting the moon. It's affecting the Saturn. Right? So the only thing that it isn't directly affecting, or rather, it isn't directly affecting the sun, the moon, but it is directly affecting the Saturn and the sun Mercury, right? And the sun Mercury directly affects the moon, and the Saturn directly affects the Jupiter. So this Mars, ultimately, I think one of the things they talked about with him was there's this Jupiter in the first. This person was always looking for a bigger, better, and initially it was a bigger and better way to kind of make money easily. So he was a burglar. He was breaking. This person ended up in jail. So this person ended up in jail for criminal activity. 12th house.
Right.
Or 4th, 8th, and 12th.
Yeah, because the 4th, 8th, and 12th.
Right. So all of that. So this person ended up in jail and then turned it around and decided, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to end up in jail. He did not want to go to jail.
So if we're looking at Saturn as representing him, then that Saturn in Aries is going to produce a daredevil, or somebody that is not alternative, somebody that's kind of maybe rebellious or aggressive, or because it's representing everything Saturn shouldn't be.
I was wondering about decisions and actions. So usually when you see Saturn in Aries and retrograde, and actually what I think is this, I think that this person always felt paralyzed and needed to go as a result. Was basically overcompensating. We were talking about how Muhammad Ali has the Mars in Taurus, and how often when planets are in detriment and fall, they overcompensate.
Right.
And so in this particular case, and I think in this case, because I think really this is the worst placement, and because it's going to show up as the booby prize. That's usually what happens. It shows up as the booby prize. Even when it gives you what you want, it still shows up as the booby prize. So it's like when things perfect and you wish they hadn't. Because that's just kind of, or it's nothing happens or nothing can happen. So you see a lot of internal paralysis with Saturn in Aries, and especially with the retrograde. So too much internal judgment, can't make a choice, won't take any action, feeling paralyzed. But then you also but then in this chart, we've got the Mars creating so much impetus and creating so much interest in danger. And so I think that's what ended up happening was this Mars, even though there's not really any connection between them, not even by Antisha, the Mars is really the motor of this chart. And it's, the Mars Neptune, right? This crazy Mars Neptune. And the Jupiter saying more, bigger, bigger, bigger. Oh, you think that's Neptune
something? Is him being addicted to it.
Exactly. And you said something about speech. They said one of the things that he was working in a mine, and then he stopped working in the mine, and they said that he started working as a salesman and realized that his greatest talent was his ability to sell himself. And Mercury is salesmanship. And look, we've got the moon in the 7th, and and the ruler of the 7th with the Mercury. So this person had the gift of gab and could sell anybody anything, more than likely. Could talk anybody into anything, including himself, maybe. And then no limits, the Jupiter in the ascendant.
And there was an issue with his lower legs, you said?
Say that again. Yeah, the lower legs. He broke his legs in 4 or 5 places in Las Vegas in 1974. And they said that he was on Aquarius. Yes, exactly.
On the ascendant. Gotcha.
Exactly. And also I think he was in a coma. He was in a coma for like a month or something after that Las Vegas stunt, because it went so badly. And but there's an interesting thing. I wonder if we could see this. He was in a feud with the Hells Angels. Okay, so one of his trademarks. Now this is interesting because I think it shows here. One of his trademarks was that Evel Knievel always wore white leather. And I remember that as a kid, but I never understood that it was because he was trying to differentiate himself from the Hells Angels. And I don't know if you know about the famous movie Easy Rider. So Easy Rider is from 1970, 1969, and it's basically about these three guys. Jack Nicholson is in it. It's Dennis Hopper. It's a famous film that's kind of about motorcycle culture, biker culture, etc. And so that's around that same time, and this kind of Harley Davidson Hells Angel cult kind of really started growing in the 60s and 70s. And so Evel Knievel was, he had a huge cult following of children. And so he was totally always coming across as the straight and narrow, as don't do drugs, kids don't do drugs, and he talked shit. He didn't talk shit in his ads and stuff, but he talked shit about the Hells Angels. And it got to such an extent that they ended up jumping him at some event, and then the public got involved and fought them and ended up sending them off. So open enemies. So open or hidden enemies. Didn't you? Hey, weren't you the one you said right at the very beginning that this person, Tamarius, you said this person might have the kind of personality that they would invoke enmity. And I think we can see that specifically from the 12th house, just enmity in general, right? We can break it down into what's hidden, who's a false friend or what's hidden, and then what's supposed to be visible in the 7th. But and note that, like you were saying, there's that sign opposition between the ruler of the 7th and the 12th, right? So there'd already be necessarily opposite. So that might actually
both caught that.
Yeah. So that might even be an issue. And then also remember the 6th house used to represent enemies. And there we have this ruler of the 6th and the 7th. So yeah.
I would have thought the enemy was a woman though, because of the moon.
No. So that was something I wanted to mention. So this is a wife beater's chart. Supposedly,
Leo, fire.
Yeah,
and then
exactly. For the cholera, exactly. And the ruler of the 8th with the 7th, right? So that could be the wife's money. So that might be right. So bringing grief to the marriage, bringing fear to the partner. I mean, this person really. The fear was the point in a lot of ways, or kind of chasing down fear, dancing with fear. Obviously, if you're a daredevil, if you're doing things that could kill you, right? And of course, the 8th house is death too, right? So if you're doing things that could kill you, then you're grappling all the time with fear of death, fear of injury. Fear of heights, if you're afraid of heights. He could have been afraid of heights and be doing it to overcome a fear of height. That's what I'm saying. I think that there was something. They said that he was a great skier, that's how it started. I think that there was something, somehow he felt impotent. And this helped. And so he had to go. He was, from what I understand, very irascible, difficult to get along with. Some guy wrote, I think, when it became the person that exposed the fact that he was a wife beater in a book that he wrote. Evel Knievel went and beat him senseless with an aluminum baseball bat. So Mars. Now, look, we don't have a lot of Mars-oriented stuff in the chart. Like I said, this stuff is in Libra. This is in Leo. The chart ruler's in Aries, so that makes some sense. But the Jupiter's in Aquarius. But when we look at it, and we realize that the Mercury sun is ruling the Mars, that then that same Mercury Sun, ruler of the eighth, is ruling the Sun. And then that Mars that's in the eighth is ruling the Saturn. And then that Saturn, who's in a Mars-related sign, is ruling this Jupiter, right? And that Jupiter is ruling the Venus. There's this really kind of unbroken circle of dispositorship in this chart that kind of starts. It starts kind of with this, but this is really, like I said, the motor of it. It's this on some level is in a major way because it's that gift of gab that got him to where he was, right? But it's really this internal thing here, in my opinion, or whatever this is about. And it's interesting to me that this is what's ruling the sun, the moon, and not this. Oh, but this is ruling the ruler of the that makes sense. The Mars is ruling the ruler of the ascendant because it would have to be, right? There's just so much of this going on. There's so much of this kind of irascible, violent, angry. This person was, here's the other thing. This person was abandoned by their father. I usually see that with Sun-Saturn oppositions. Sun-Saturn oppositions, I almost always ask, is there something going on between you and your father, or did you grow up with your father? Is your father in your life? I always ask that whenever I see Sun, especially when they're really in opposition. But even this is close enough, because remember the Sun is 7.5, and Saturn has 4.5. That's 11. So they're still at the very end of their moiety. You know, the Sun is separating, but separating at the very, very end.
And so both of the planets that represent the father are debilitated by Sun.
Exactly.
And you know,
Are debilitated by sign.
Even though it's a well, yeah, no, that's an opposition.
And in that oppositional relationship. Yeah. And they say the mother did too. The mother left as well.
I would have thought, but that's interesting. I would have thought it would have been an adversarial relationship rather than abandonment. But the 12th house is being ruled by Saturn. That makes sense. But in general, the Sun and Saturn, I see that as adversarial rather than abandonment. But,
I mean, I've seen it in chart. I mean, I've just seen it in charts where it can show up as any of those. I mean, the first time I saw it, it was no father. The first few times that I saw it, you grew up without a father. Then after a while, there's always something. There's always something with them. So either they're not around, or there's a problem, and so they're not around. Right? If there's a problem, they're not around. So usually they're not around. And yeah, so that's basically just what I've seen from the charts that I've worked with. But you know, so I wouldn't rule out either. Like I said, I always ask, what's going on with your dad? And is he in your life? Is your father in your life? That's usually what I ask when I see this. So that would be already a question. And then it turned out both parents abandoned him and left him with his grandparents. And so, and then I think like the Josephine Baker is a similar story to Ella Fitzgerald, was a street urchin, lived on the streets. You know, this one not so much, but you know, wild child that you know, kind of went off the rails really early. Okay. We're already at 4:30. Oh wait, well that's right. We started at 3. All right. Last one. Okay. Talk to me about this person.
what in particular should we be thinking about? Is there a question for this one, or just
What
general?
what's this person's superpower?
By superpower, do you mean gift or talent?
Mhm.
Uh,
Uncovering information.
What brings you to that? Is it because of the moon in the 10th, the rule of the 4th?
No, all that stuff in Scorpio deposited by
Got it.
Mars and Virgo.
So what did you say? Uncovering information or like?
Yeah, uncovering information. Something about things that are supposed to be hidden, unearthing that kind of stuff. Attention to detail.
I think you're onto something. Get a little more specific about it, because I think yes, but in a specific context.
One thing I'm noticing is all of those planets in the seventh house and how that's ruled by Mars. So I'm looking at the chart rule. Okay, I'm gonna try to follow it like this. Venus being the chart ruler is in the seventh house, Scorpio. So Venus is debilitated in Scorpio, but in general, Venus can represent, like the music, arts, and children and pleasure and stuff like that. But being in Scorpio, Mars is sign that can be a problem. So that could be an issue with control, violence, obsession, or maybe abuse. We see Venus is with a male planet. Well, it's causing me with the sun. Well, that's not causing me. That's combustion. Yeah, it's not in the 15, within 15.
Okay, so all of the themes. So if you combine, so basically you kind of you both just kind of plumb the depth of Scorpio, right? That's basically like, she's talking about the side of Scorpio that, can uncover the hidden. You're talking about the side of Scorpio, all of the other aspects of it. But okay, so we've established that that these planets are in Scorpio. Now what?
So there could be a male influence that could be dominating the life or being a very strong influence on the person.
Well, what house is it happening in?
The house of partnerships and marriage.
So
and the sun is ruling the. Okay, go ahead.
Let's get really clear that the 7th house is the house of others. That the 7th house, it's not just who we are in partner with. It's also, it's what makes Oprah Winfrey a great interviewer. Wherever we're face to face with another, that's the 7th house. So that means if you come to me to buy a car, that's the 7th house. That means if you come to me in a bar to buy me a drink in order to take me home and fuck me, that's the 7th house. If you see what I'm saying? So it doesn't always have to do necessarily with that. We need to be able to get as specific.
So we can just deal with opponents.
It can be opponents. It can be just others. It doesn't have to be somebody specific. What we can tell from the Venus as the chart ruler, Venus is interpersonal. That's Mercury and Venus are the interpersonal planets. Mercury is not able to get intimate. Venus is. So whenever we see her, especially when she's the ruler of the ascendant, we know that this person is really primarily focused on or inclined towards the interpersonal. Then we've got Venus in the 7th house, which does what? Reaffirms it, compounds it. So now, and then we've got Venus and the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury all there. So we've got Mercury there, and now we've got the Mercury Jupiter there. And what do we know? What parts of the body does Mercury rule?
The shoulders, the hands.
What else?
Fingers.
What else?
The lungs.
Nope. Shanice?
I'm thinking. It's the stuff that has two, right? So like shoulder, and is it lower jaw too?
Mercury rules the tongue and
Tongue?
speech.
Speech, okay.
Mercury and Jupiter together opposing the ascendant. We're using your thing now, Shanice.
Okay.
That would say something about this person. What would that say? Mercury, Jupiter opposing the ascendant.
They talk a lot, or people talk a lot about them.
Fit. So I'm thinking that this person philosophical speak. See, so I think you both were on it as far as understanding what Scorpio means, right? Which was the ability to uncover secrets. That beginning was so perfect, because what I think this person's power is the ability to uncover other people's secrets and other people's secret selves. This person, note also then that the Venus is trining the Saturn, or squaring the Saturn. The Saturn would be other people's secrets, 4th house from the 7th. Now I wouldn't expect it that way, but what showed me what you really, in my opinion, kind of pegged it without pegging it, with the Venus there, with the sun which illuminates, with the Jupiter with the Mercury Jupiter which can talk the philosophy, right? I've got Mercury Jupiter, and the philosophy is deep and fathomless. And
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, at first when I saw this chart, I was gonna say, is there an over-identification of the person with their partner, with the Venus in detriment in the 7th house? But now maybe partners may overly identify with this individual and then expose secret information that this person becomes privy to and is able to talk about.
There we go. Maybe it's not even about exposing. Maybe it's not even about exposing it to the public necessarily, but it was about exposing to them, to themselves, right? This thing. So the secret comes out, and then the person who holds the secret, it's exposed to them as well, right? It comes out into the open for the person. Right? Maybe the person has only ever thought these things, and now they've spoken them, right? You speak things into existence, right? And so I think, see, there's that Mercury once again, right on the cusp. The tongue, the speech. The tongue, the speech. Note that the Saturn rules the 10th and the 11th. The Venus is applying to, the Venus and the Sun are both applying to the square of the Saturn. And the Saturn rules the 11th, and we think of that as, so very, very good. This is the chart of Charles Manson. Charles Manson is the one who basically had a bunch of cult followers who then murdered Sharon Tate and a bunch of other people in the late 60s, in the Helter Skelter murders in the late 60s. And Charles Manson himself did none of the murdering, but he basically instigated these people to doing so. And I've seen some interviews with some of the people who killed, and they said that Charlie didn't convince me to murder somebody. He just uncovered the murderer. So you got it. You were right on it when you said it. That was exactly what he said. He said the murderer was already in me. He just allowed it to have free reign. He uncovered it. He scratched the surface, uncovered it, and then let it breathe and act on its own. And he encouraged it. Now we've got another Mars Neptune. Both of the men have the Mars Neptune and Virgo. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't it weird how I do this? I choose these charts just on a whim, and they almost always have, the two women have the stuff at the late degrees of Libra, and the two men have the stuff have the Mars, Neptune, and Virgo. How fascinating. All right. So And of course, it's with, this is, we call it the house of groups, but we can think of this as the house of friends, right? This is the house of others. These are the 3, 11, and 7. Those are all the house of others, right? So those are our social houses where we come into contact with others. And so ruler the third, in this particular case, it's Mercury or the moon. So the Mercury's right there, the moon. And really a cult is a third house thing, right? Look, there's the Mercury, there's the moon. Oh, wait, the moon is the ruler of the fourth, it looks like in this chart. Midheaven, yeah, 20 Cancer. Okay, so the part of fortune is right on it. But they call themselves the family, if I'm not mistaken. I remember they called themselves the family.
What is interesting is that they're bringing out the worst in each other. The ruler of the 8th and the 2nd are together, which would be like the bringing out the worst in each other.
Right, going down to the underworld to bring it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And note here, I just saw the ruler of the part of fortune is in the 11th house with Saturn. So that moon is there in Aquarius with Rahu, right? We talk about Rahu being things that are crazy, things that are out of the ordinary, things that are unconventional, things that are underground, underground crime, politics, crime, anything where backdoor dealings are happening, anything where we're sacrificing our ethics to get whatever it is that we want. And here the part of fortune is doing that, and with the Saturn, the ruler of the 11th. So we see how strong this person's ability to manifest what they wanted or make what they wanted to happen. And that this Venus, this other power of how to kind of penetrate others, how to fully penetrate others, and how ultimately the answer I was looking for was how to influence others. And of course, the speech would be the influence. And so this person could get underneath, could penetrate others, get under their skin, like you say, uncover their secrets, and then influence, have a subtle influence. Now, there's a great story about Angela Lansbury, who just died. Angela Lansbury, very, very famous actress. Her daughter got involved with the Mansons. And she got, typical kind of Hollywood kid. She lived in Bel Air. And ultimately, Charlie Manson was a predator, pinpointing or targeting children of Hollywood celebrities, because usually they were in a state of malaise. There was almost always something difficult going on with the children. There was a disillusionment with almost all of the children of Hollywood stars. And so he found them to be the most kind of malleable, and also he wanted to kind of infiltrate and use them to kind of bring things down. And she met him even, and she said that he was an uncanny, really, really strongly uncanny kind of person, a person with maybe unconventional powers. There's that moon Mercury and Saturn, that moon Rahu Saturn, but with kind of unknowable kind of powers. And so what she said that her daughter got involved with him, and she was already having drug issues, and when she got involved with him, she started doing heroin and everything. She basically put her career on hold, and she moved her entire family to Ireland. And they live there, and basically that's where they live. They've been living ever since she moved there. And then she kind of slowly built her career back up after that. But she was so afraid. She met him, and she was so afraid of his charisma and his influence that she knew her daughter was going to be a goner. Her son was getting into it a little bit too, but her daughter was really fully into it. And so she took both of her kids, her entire family, and she moved them to Ireland to get away from Charles Manson. So that's an interesting little tidbit. All right, I'm not going to go to, let's go ahead and stop there.